you guys are the largest financial influencers on TikTok, and the oldest one is 22. You guys haven't even been through anything yet. How are you the largest financial influencers? If you're going to build a brand, you have to give people a reason to connect with something beyond the product or the service. How you do that, you've got to take people through the journey that you're currently going through. I get invited in 2021 to go to FinCon, and there was this like TikTok influencer house that I got invited to. I go to this house, and the oldest person is 22 years old. You guys haven't even been through anything yet. How are you the largest financial influencers? And this is why, because they tapped into something that we have forgotten, which was they weren't telling people how to do it. They were taking people along the journey with them, right? So you had this girl who was in college. She was learning about finance, and she would build content going, this is what I learned today, and I'm going to try it, and let's download this app, and I'm going to make an investment. So she was walking her peers through the journey for the first time, and that's what people were resonating with. I made a decision, I messed up, I lost money. Her audience is going, oh my gosh, okay, I watched you do it, I saw the mistake you made, now I'm gonna try to do something different. That's what people connect with. It's difficult to bring people through the reality of your life. It's easy to just show them the wins, but the reality is people don't connect with wins. People connect with struggle.
All right. So thanks for being on the show, Mikey. I'm super excited to hear your story.
Thanks for having me.
Pro skateboarder to entrepreneur to politician.
Yeah, that one's the weird one. Yeah.
I know, right? I'm like, I don't know how to put my finger on the pulse of this one.
Yeah.
But
I'm still trying to figure it out too.
When did you get into politics?
I ran for city council 2 years ago. So the 22 cycle. And leading up to that, I never had a desire. I had never done anything like it, but I did follow politics, somewhat locally, but definitely statewide because of real estate. And so much of the political decisions impact how we build. So I was following it on that I was following it because of that, but no, I never thought I would be involved.
Yeah.
That was, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that one out.
So mayor pro tem. I had to actually look up what that meant.
Yeah, mayor pro tem basically means you're like right hand to the mayor. And how we have a rotating mayor seat. So it's for a year and then somebody else moves over. So typically mayor pro tem becomes mayor the following year. Okay,
cool. And usually. Is that your plan?
It might happen whether or not is my plan.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think you'd be a good mayor.
Yeah, I think I'd be okay at it. Yeah.
You're like the least politician I've met.
Thank you. Like. I appreciate that. I will take that as a big compliment.
Yeah. It was funny. I was at the Trump rally a little while ago, and Trump was like, I hate politicians, and I wouldn't call myself a politician. And whoever was interviewing him, I think it was Tucker Carlson, was like, I'm pretty sure you're a politician. Like you're about to be the president of the United States.
Yeah.
So
it's weird. It's weird when it happens.
Yeah.
I think most of us have a distaste, regarding politicians. And so once you get into it, you're like, does that mean I'm that now? And I don't know. That's at least what I'm wrestling with.
Yeah. Well, so for those of you who don't know, Mikey Taylor was a pro skateboarder, and I've read like one of the best in the world, which is cool as could be. And then you transitioned you ended your career in skateboarding, which I'd love to learn how that identity shift was for you. Because I can't imagine like me having entrepreneurship taken from me. I wouldn't even know who I was. And then, so you transitioned from skateboarding into entrepreneurship, and you actually built a massive Archer Brewery? St.
Archer Brewery. Yeah.
St. Archer Brewery.
Yep.
Yeah. A brewing company out of San Diego. And then that was acquired by Miller Coors.
Miller Coors.
Miller Coors.
Yep.
Yeah. And you ended up having an $80 million exit on your brewing company, which is absolutely incredible. And now you have $315 million of assets under management, and you're in the real estate space. So you manage a fund, and you guys do construction and value add storage facilities and multifamily, particularly.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, like we just started with, now you're in politics and you're mayor pro tem of Thousand Oaks, California.
Correct.
So, and you have a family and a wife and kids, and you're awesome and fun and happy and all the things. So I'm excited to hear how you do it all.
All right, let's do it.
So what is your story leading up to becoming a pro skateboarder, first off? And then how was that experience? And what was the most challenging thing as you realized that career was ending and you had to make a shift?
Yeah. So it happened very organically. Like I wasn't the kid who was 9 years old, who dreamed to be a pro skateboarder, told myself I was going to do it and dreamed it into reality. Not my story. I started skateboarding, fell in love with skateboarding. I have an obsessive personality, which can be very useful for trying to get good at something. And I was just doing that until about 16 years old. And at 16, I started getting pressure from my parents to get a job. And I didn't want to work because I felt like that meant I would have to skate less. And so I tried to figure out an alternative path to avoid getting a job. And so I came up with this idea that I could get sponsors to give me free product, like shoes and skateboards and clothes. And then one, I wouldn't have to buy any of that stuff. And two, I thought I'd have leftover product to sell to kind of skaters in my neighborhood. And that would be my income stream. And so I pitched this idea to my parents. And I think they thought it was so nuts that they were like, yeah, go for it. And, figure it out, realize that you can't do this, and then you'll go get a job. Yeah. And I ended up getting sponsored, getting free product.
By DC?
In the beginning, no. In the beginning, it was a shoe company called Duff's. Most people are not going to know what that is. And this skateboard company called Maple. Those are my two sponsors. And then that worked out until about 18. And from 16 to 18, some of these companies started putting me in the magazines. Like I started having ads for them. And I started getting a little bit of name recognition. And then my senior year, I got the opportunity to travel throughout Europe. And so I looked at my parents and I was like, hey, I have this like cool opportunity to, go throughout France and Germany and Spain for like a month. Like, I think I could do something with this. And my parents were a little bit freaked out because what I was really talking about was not going to school. And so what I thought was going to be a 3-year kind of experiment of having fun and then wrapping back around to college, turned into like a 14-year career.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And are you from California?
Born and raised.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And you're never leaving, huh?
I'm not. I have a couple non-negotiables and we would leave because of that. But I'm trying not to leave. That was a big reason why I ran for city council. I wanted to take as much off the board as possible that would potentially bring up the conversation between my wife and I about looking for somewhere else to live.
Yeah.
Like I love California. I love where I live. Like my city, I think is the best we have. But, I also recognize that California is pretty bad at doing a lot of other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's hard
to balance.
Because it's beautiful. It's the best state.
You cannot get this weather anywhere else.
Mm-mm.
But there's a lot of people leaving even with how beautiful and how good the weather is. And that to me is I guess this is the best way to say it. When I was skating, I would travel the world, but I would travel the nation a lot, right? And everywhere I would go, Nebraska, Ohio, Florida, every kid would be like mesmerized with the idea that we were from California. And what you would hear from these young kids is, it's my dream to go there. I can't wait to go there. Fast forward now, when I tell people, one, I live in California, and then I match that with I invest in California, I would say 60 to 70% of people look at me like I'm crazy, right? The fact that we are not like accepted by all as we're the best state in the nation, I think is a reckoning. What would be the best way to say it? It shows that we have significantly dropped the ball. Like that is, we need to get back to that.
Yeah. It used to be the American dream.
That's right. That's right.
Now that dream's on fire.
Literally. That's right.
Yeah. So, and I could go on a whole tangent about that. And I'm actually curious. I was at my brokerage dinner last night and we were talking about if people think it'll affect property values in California or the surrounding states, or if it's not a big enough impact.
I think prices are going to go up
in California, not surrounding states.
Well, the hard part about real estate when we talk about prices is real estate is very fragmented. And so what happens in a certain county does not mean it's going to happen in another county inside that state or a state beyond that, right? My outlook is a little bit contrarian, but one of the biggest reasons why I invest in California is also why I think most people leave, right? Our policy makers, I think, are poor at making good policy. And so when you look at what it takes to build in California, they basically do everything they can to de-incentivize investors to build. right? And so what that has created is 20 years of no significant added supply, which has brought California into the most extreme housing crisis we've ever seen, right? So if California is 2 to 2.2 million units short, and California continues to make it harder to build, do you think we make that gap up? Or do you think it just becomes worse or exacerbated? I think it becomes exacerbated. Mm-hmm. So, does that mean there's going to be an outflow of people into other states? Yes, but you're starting to see that number decrease, right? Like we had 2 years of significant net migration loss, which were 21 and 22. And then if you look at 23, we had net migration loss, but if you consider population growth just from birth, we actually increased this year. So I think now we're getting to the point where it's a financial decision. It's just too expensive to live in California. But then where do they go? And then what's the policy in the states they're going, right? Like Arizona, you saw a big boom. You saw this in a lot of states, right? Your Sunbelt states, Texas for sure, Florida. So you have an increase of demand because of people coming in. But is it difficult to build in these states? And if it's not difficult to build, you'll see the typical development cycle, which is we'll build too much, and then we'll have to give rent concessions to get occupancy up, and then you'll see the market crash, and then you'll see the correction, right? So depends.
Yeah. Yeah, because we were talking about that last night, and one of the guys was saying, it'll just make prices in California go up because a lot of the people that lost their homes and whatnot they're wealthy people. They're not necessarily financially challenged people. And a lot of the, migration is probably just going to be to the outskirts cities and other cities throughout the state.
Yeah, we're seeing it right now. Like
yeah.
The amount of people that were displaced, I think it was like between 7,000 and 10,000 families. And they're entering into a rental market where there are no rentals. And so you watched, I don't know if you saw this, but the governor was basically, or the AG was coming after investors for raising prices beyond 10%. That's because you just exacerbated an already, big challenge, which is too many people chasing too few of units or homes.
So, and that happened. My brother lost everything in Maui last year in the fires, and same thing. There's even more of a housing shortage. There already was a housing shortage. Right. Now there's all these issues with tourism houses and Airbnb houses, but yet there's shortages for the locals and everything like that. And so prices have just gone up.
Yeah, that's
more
right.
So
that's right. I know. Yeah. I think it's, look, you can make the argument that it can be good for investors, but for society, it's not healthy. You're not seeing a free market be free, you know?
Right. So I want to talk about the fund and investing in California because I'm terrified of putting, like most people say, I would never put my money in California, right?
Thank you for that outlook.
Yeah. But I want to hear, because you're obviously successful at investing in California.
Right.
But backing up just in the story of your life. So how did you go from pro skateboarder to starting a brewery company that ended up being worth $80 million, and all this was in a fairly short period of time.
It was.
And what did that look like, and how did you start that company, get into that company, and grow that company to 80 million, and then have an exit?
Okay, so how I got there, when I was skating, the cool thing about it is when you get your own signature line, like I had my own skateboards, I had my own clothing line, I had my own shoe line. I didn't have to start the company. Mm-hmm. But I got to work with the designers to come up with, what the product's going to look like. I got to work with the marketing team to figure out how to market that shoe. I worked with the sales team because if I sold more shoes, I made more money. And so I got an inside look on what it took to actually create product and how to introduce that product into the market without having to learn how to bring a company to life, which was a great stepping kind of stone into creating the brewery. That mixed with, I was very entrepreneurial without realizing it in the skate industry. I would negotiate all my deals. I was like the DIY kind of person, which creates a different type of challenge, but I kind of always had that in me. And so now fast forward to the brewery, I was with a friend who came from the surf industry, and we were basically talking about what companies we could create that were outside of our norm, right? In the skate industry, it's always shoe companies, clothing companies, skateboard companies, or like a hat brand. It's never beer, or it's never like an outside industry that doesn't have such a small ceiling on it, because skateboarding is a pretty small niche. And so we just kind of got to the point where we were like, what about beer? And at that time, craft beer was really starting to grow in California. And so we were just like, let's just do it. And so we, went around the state meeting with other brewers to figure out what it meant to actually brew beer and sell it. And we figured out that it was really expensive to do. And so we got introduced to somebody who helped us create a business plan and helped educate us on raising money, because we didn't have enough, we had to get investors for it. Mm-hmm. And then we went out, we raised money, we raised enough to start the company. We hired I think we had 8 people when we launched.
Wow.
And then we had an idea that was a potential disruptor that worked. And so when our brand kind of launched, it was different than anything the craft beer industry had seen. And it just went nuts from the second we opened doors.
Wow. And you make that sound super simple. We just
got
brutal. A mentor.
It was brutal. Yeah, it was absolutely brutal.
Raised some money, had 8 people, and voila, we sold for $80 million.
Yeah, no, that process was awful.
What was the hardest part about it, and how'd you overcome it? Like what?
Okay. There were a lot of hard parts to it. I would say the first part was raising money as someone who had no business experience, no experience in the craft beer industry, mm-hmm. and no experience raising money. That was hard. We basically had to do it from friends and family. And the amount we are raising was much larger than what I think thought we could do, even though we did it. We raised about $2.5 million, which was nuts back then.
Yeah.
And then
what year was this?
This was 2011 is when we started working on it.
And it was at the bottom of the market.
And then, yeah, exactly. So even as you say that, part of our pitch back then was how well alcohol performs during recessions, right? Most people, if you didn't go through 2008 with money, you don't realize how painful it was for years afterward and how freaked out everybody was. In 2011, 2012, people were freaked out still. And so we would say, look, during a recession, everyone buys beer. And you saw people get comfortable with that. So yes, that was a tough time to do it. And then I would say the second hardest part was learning how to manage people. That was something I had no experience in. How expensive the craft beer industry is to grow. It's really capital intense. And then the last one I would say was building something with an exit in mind, but not knowing if it's ever going to pan out, mm-hmm. right? Like starting a business at the end, and when you get to hear about the story of selling something, you're like, oh yeah, that was just like too easy. Every single day you think the company's going out of business. Mm-hmm. Like it's such an uncomfortable feeling. Mm-hmm. And so I think we had to get used to that from the public, it looked like we were killing it because it was so new. And like internally, we're like, are we going to do this? Are we going to do this? Where's our money? We need more money. Mm-hmm. It was hard.
Yeah. Managing cash flows and people and everything. And so did you work with a capital raiser where you paid a percentage, or you guys just did it yourself?
Did it all ourselves.
Okay. And you just gave a portion of the equity, or were you just doing like a percent of interest, like a note?
No, we did. So we basically had a valuation, and then we gave, gosh, if I remember right, I think we gave 45% of the business away to raise the money.
Yeah.
I want to say we valued it a little over $5 million when we launched. Okay. I might be off with that, but that's what I think it was. And then we raised the 2.5, and they took their portion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at what moment in time did you realize that it was going to be really successful? Like where you're like, okay, we got this.
Well, I knew that we had something special. So this is kind of the hardest part. We opened doors, and it was a shock to the system in the beer industry. We were doing something so different. And really what that looked like in the beer industry, all the breweries at that time, they were selling beer because they would create these like specialty, like limited edition brews. And that the beer itself was driving the sale. Mm-hmm. And we came in and went, one, let's sell a brand and let's create a community so that when they're buying our product, they actually are buying it because they're feeling like they're one of us. And two, let's water down beer a little bit. Like at that time, everybody was making beer so potent. Like, you would drink one double IPA, you'd be smoked. And so we were like, let's make this more sessionable. Like, let's make it so that somebody could drink multiple. And that, like, coming together and then using really Instagram to promote it through our investors, it was just like right idea, right time. And so, like, we knew that everyone was talking about us. We had lines around the brewery for people buying it. Our growth was, I think we were the fastest growing brewery in California.
Wow.
But we were burning cash. Like, we couldn't keep up. So I knew we had something special. I didn't know if we were going to make money or not, though. We had to sell to make money.
Okay. So was the company not profitable until you sold?
No.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And then you removed yourself from the brand. You built a brand similar, right?
Yeah. So
or
basically,
were you the face of it?
No, I was not the face. So basically what we did, we raised the money primarily through skaters, surfers, snowboarders, some musicians, artists, and then we made them our ambassadors. So our investors were our ambassadors. A lot of them had followings. So did myself. And so I just made myself one of the 30 people, and we promoted it collectively.
That's awesome. I know, a lot of like TikTok shop is a big thing right now. And a lot of Fleischman and Josh Snow and like a lot of these big names, they promote through influencers, basically. And so that's a really big thing. And I think that's a genius, brilliant idea. And so social media was a huge part of your strategy to building the brand.
I think it was everything. And it was on accident. That's the thing. Like, this was 2011. There's no influencers at this point. And when we raised the money, we had like a very small marketing budget. And I can't remember who said this. Maybe it was my partner, Josh. But somebody said, what if we saved the money or used the money in a different category and promoted it on Instagram? And we're like, man, maybe that would work. And it just worked. It's different now. Like, you can't do that anymore. It's
harder. You
way
can.
Harder.
It's harder.
Way harder.
Yeah. So you're a big believer then in social media.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And you have your own podcast.
My own podcast. Yep. Yeah. I'm heavy on social. I'm a big believer in the power of it.
Yeah. Well, you do have like 1 million followers. On Instagram,
I'm active. I use it a lot.
Yeah. That's so cool. Oh my gosh. Okay. I love it. And so when you got you started the company after you exited, or you stopped being a professional skateboarder, right? Or did you start it while you were a professional skateboarder?
I started it technically while I was still a pro skateboarder, but it was kind of the tail end of my career.
Okay.
And the brand was so successful and so cool that it kind of gave me a little bit more relevancy, where without that, I don't think I would have had it. And so it kind of was the beginning of me stepping away. And then by the time I exited the company, I was no longer a pro skateboarder either.
Okay. And so many athletes, we hear about this all the time. They, sign these big contracts and then they end up broke later in their life. And were you prepared for that when you were a pro athlete? Were you like, hey, I need to build something else because this is going to end at some point? Or how did that process happen?
Okay, I was prepared for the financial leap. The emotional leap, I was not. So basically, when I told my parents that I wasn't going to go to college, and I'm an 80s baby. So like it was drilled in our heads that if you don't go to college, you're not making money. And so my parents like panicked about me being a pro skateboarder because skateboarding was small. You didn't make a ton of money. And I think they were concerned that I was jeopardizing my future. So my parents strongly recommended that I get a financial advisor. And at this point, I'm 19 years old. I'm making maybe $1,000 a month. And I meet this guy. I'm not even making close to the amount that he should even be helping me. And he took like a big brother approach. And so he started teaching me about credit, about a budget, about asset allocation. And he started helping me figure out a path on where I could place dollars that were going to help me in the situation I was in, which was I was in theory going to make the most amount of money from ages 19 to 26. And in that's typically your wealth build years, and you don't put cash flow on till, you're usually looking in your 60s, right? Well, I needed wealth build because of my age, but I needed cash flow to supplement my income once my career ended. And so he was a really big believer in real estate. And so I invested in my first storage property because of him. I started investing in debt funds because of him. He was the one who opened up commercial real estate to me.
Wow. And
And
how old were you?
Oh gosh, I started with him when I was 19. And so my biggest challenge was, and this is something that you hear a lot. So anyone who feels like, yeah, I would love to invest in real estate, but I don't make enough money to do it. I feel like that's what I felt also, but it can be done. I basically lived off nothing, right? I would make, I think in the beginning, I started making 60 grand a year, then 80 grand a year, and I started getting close to 100 grand a year. I was living off maybe 20 of it. So I was pretending like I was broke. And then all of that money that I was saving was going into investments. It wasn't going into my savings account. And then after years of doing that, you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, the dividends, I just keep reinvesting that. When they're selling an asset, that capital gains, I throw it right back into a new asset. And you get to a point where you have a pretty sizable investment amount. And then that put me in a pretty good position when my career ended.
And so you were not investing in your own properties, you were investing in funds.
Oh, great question. My philosophy was this. My career is skateboarding. My greatest opportunity is skateboarding. So I want all of my focus towards that, right? If I'm making, like I got to a point where I started making pretty good money when I was selling shoes, and it just didn't make sense for me to take half of my time and go flip a property to make a 20% return when I can make a 200% return if I focus on my actual craft. And so all of my investments were done passively until I started the brewery.
Do what you do best and hire out the rest.
100%.
Yeah, I think so many people, they're such, I don't know, control freaks maybe, or fear driven, or they're like, I can do it. I was talking about this with Sean Lynch, our friend, you know, how he just did it all and he didn't delegate anything for so long. And he was managing, you know, building a logistics oil company. He was managing 66 rentals. He was doing all these things. And his biggest regret was not delegating sooner.
100%. We have a lot of investors that go through the path of Airbnb or storage or whatever the trend is at the moment. And then they'll wrap back around to us and go, I am so sick of doing this all myself. I thought it was passive. It is not. It's like a second job. There you go. And I think that's the smart way to do it, unless you want to build a business in the asset class.
Right.
If you want to get started, if that's your end goal, then yeah, go do it yourself.
Which is what you ended up doing.
Which is what I ended up doing.
So for people who may not know, and that's the thing, I think there's a big misconception that you need millions of dollars to invest in real estate, and you really don't. First off, you can invest in funds, and there's different funds. Some you have to be an accredited investor, which means you make a certain amount of money, or have a certain net worth. Some you don't. You like Pace Morby, he is a fund where you can invest like, I don't know, $1,000 or something like that. So there's different funds and you can invest that. The real professionals do it. It's completely passive, and then you get your return and you still get some like depreciation tax benefits that you get from real estate, and you can do what you do best where you're going to maximize your returns there. So I wouldn't, just like you said, I wouldn't be your own DIY real estate investor unless you really want to get in the business of real estate investing, like owning a fix and flip company, or owning a construction company, or owning a property management company, or a development company, or whatever, right? Or being a real estate agent, having a brokerage, all these things. And so there's different kinds of funds. So you have an equity fund. I have a debt fund. And I also invest in other people's funds, you know, as someone who has my own fund, which I'm just getting it off the ground, so I can't even really say that. I
can't wait to talk to you about the debt fund. I had those. I wound them down.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll have to talk about it.
I know. I can't wait. Yeah.
Yeah. But so I think that's really cool that you invested in funds and then you end up starting your fund. But now, so you had an exit on that company. How long from the time you founded it to the time you exited?
We started working on it in 2011, and then we sold it end of 15. Basically, like I think we closed November of 15.
That's insane.
I know.
Holy shit.
We weren't expecting that. We thought it'd take us longer.
Yeah, well, that's nice.
It was nice. Yeah, that was cool.
That's crazy to build that much value in 4 years.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my God.
I know.
That is awesome.
I know. We're stepping on the gas. We were going for it. Yeah, at that time, you had Coors, you had Anheuser, you had Constellation, you had all the giants buying brands. And so you were watching multiples basically increase because, you know, it was a frenzy.
Yeah.
And so we knew we had a moment in time to get to the exit. And I think that's why we were going for it so hard. because we felt like once they backed out, everything was going to soften.
What is like the best advice that you could give to someone who's looking to create a startup and have a multi-million or $100 million exit?
Best piece of advice I can give you if you're trying to start a business to sell, you have to start with the end in mind. Like, if you don't do that, it's going to be very difficult for you to build something the right way. The reason being, when you know where you're going, then the question just becomes, is the decision I'm making today help me get to that goal? And if the answer is no, you don't do it. But if you don't have a North Star, especially in startup, it feels like you're just, trying everything, and it can feel like you're drowning. And so figure out where you're going, build the vehicle to get there. And what I would say, most importantly, do a business plan. Every time I start a business, I don't want to do one, and I force myself to do it. It is so valuable. Build a business plan as if you're going to raise money from investors, even if you don't need to, and go present it to people and let people poke holes in it. And give yourself kind of the highest chance of success possible before you launch.
Yeah. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you nowhere.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think that's great. Just reverse engineering with the end in mind. And I'm actually listening to a book right now, B 2.0, like Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0. And it's talking all about the visionary and the leadership and everything from the biggest brands in the world and the greatest leaders in the world. And they say that nothing is more important than having a very clear vision, because that's what creates like extreme performance.
100%. I think it goes beyond business too. I think it goes to us personally. Like, if you don't know where you're going, how do you even gauge your metrics of success, right? Like, why are you here? What's the purpose of all this? What do I want to be when I'm older? What do I want my kids to remember? That's something we all need to address.
Yeah, I agree. And how have you, so we didn't really get into the emotional side of your life yet. And I want to dive into that because I think it's super important. And, we go on these podcasts or people see you on social media and they're like, well, this guy's fucking cool. He built this big company and he's a politician and all this stuff. And they don't really see like what it really takes and what the pain that we had to go through and like these rock bottom moments in our life. And, I'm super open about many rock bottom moments in my life and my struggles with anxiety and depression and eating disorders and all these things. And, being suicidal when I was 21 years old and I used work as a coping mechanism and a fear-driven thing for a long time. But yeah, so like what was the rock bottom moment in your life and how did you overcome that and get through that? Okay.
The biggest rock bottom moment of my life so far was 2017. And for me, it was, and this is something athletes struggle with. And you also actually see people when they retire struggle with this as well, because a lot of times our job becomes our identity. It feels like athletes even more so. But I didn't realize how much of my identity was wrapped into me being a pro skateboarder. And so when we sold the brewery, I'm no longer a pro skateboarder. I found myself 2016, 17, trying to figure out who I was, what I was doing. And in that like moment of despair, my wife basically like hit me with, this isn't working. Like our marriage, this isn't the marriage I want. And I had 2 little kids at this time. So basically this is how I had gotten there. To become a pro skateboarder and tapped into kind of the obsessive personality type that I am, it was all my career. Like 100% basically went into my career. And then my wife and kids got like a distant second. And then even to compound that, I was traveling 6 months of the year. So I wasn't home a lot. And then I decided to start a business on top of all of this. And then when you stripped it away, like the 2 things that are more important than the business and the career were my wife and kids. And they're, the 3 that are looking at me going, this isn't it. And so 2017, I had to make some pretty big decisions and figure out really what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be known for. And I kind of had to rebuild what I neglected for a long time. And so I started with my wife, started working on our marriage, started with my kids and bringing them into being a priority. And then once I had that right, I started working on the business. And I tried to build the business this time with them in mind, as opposed to I'm going to be successful first, stop at nothing, and kind of justify that through being a provider, right? And I was terrified. Like when I started this business, I was very scared that the model of success that I knew wasn't going to be applied, because this time I had non-negotiables with time spent with my family. And I wasn't sure if it was going to be successful. I was definitely concerned with it.
And that's Commune Capital.
That was Commune when I launched Commune.
And so there's a man named Garnett Morris who's amazing, and he's, I don't know, 70 years old, and he's centimillionaire, had a really rough background, lost family members to suicide, struggled with addiction, was like hundreds of pounds overweight at some point in his life. But I was in one of my masterminds last week, and he said that we all are walking around with bricks on our head. And like, what do you need to let go of to really become the person that you want to be and live the life that you want to live? And so when you said that, it just reminded me of that, is like, you had a brick on your head of, in order for me to be this version of success that I believe in, I have to sacrifice time with my kids or my wife or my friends or my whatever, right? Like I have to go all in on this. And so you had to let go of that brick and realize you can still have the time with your kids and your wife and whatever else you're prioritizing, and still probably you ended up building something way more successful, and things like that. And so I'm struggling with that right now, like this little bit of an identity crisis, because my whole identity has always been in business, always been in my success, always been in what I can produce, because I had no self-worth as a child growing up. And so I have, I always said I was going to be a billionaire, and I was going to build a $1 billion brand. And because the more money I have, the more impact I can make, and da-da-da-da-da. And, some people started to challenge me on that, of like, oh, that's just an ego thing, or, oh, that's just you being disconnected and you're not actually fulfilled and whatever. But then Garnett re-challenged me on that, because he said he's going to be a billionaire, and he's almost there. And I have a brick that in order to become a billionaire or build $1 billion company organization, I have to sacrifice joy, peace, purpose, relationships, friendships, and all of those things. And so I've had this little bit of an identity crisis lately. Like, is that something I really want? Or do I want to be peaceful and happy and whatever? And then he's like, well, you can have both.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I
would have told you something different, I think.
Yeah.
I think it actually, you're always making a decision on what you're willing to sacrifice and for what. And, for me personally, like if you look at our business, we're going to be pretty soon managing $1 billion. That doesn't mean the business is valued at $1 billion, but I've always looked at like, let's say I have a goal of being worth $1 billion. I feel like what it would take for me to get there would be a sacrifice that on some of them I'm not willing to give. So I don't know. That's interesting. That's an interesting idea.
It is. Yeah. And I think I'm playing with it, right? I'm playing with this idea, because it's like, is that really a reality? That, is that really just a brick on my head? And we were talking briefly, and
how old is this guy? 70?
Yeah. And he said, it's not to say that you're not going to go through discomfort. Of course, you're going to go through discomfort. Like, it's like growing a muscle. You go to a point of failure, and then your muscle heals and grows, and then you grow stronger, and then it becomes easier, and you keep doing it. And so same thing with this, but it doesn't, I guess the theory is it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be peace, joy, good relationship, good husband, good wife, good parent, all these things. Or I'm an absolute, I build this beautiful, big creation that is beyond what most people will ever even attempt. And so I'm playing with that too. Is like, is that true? Is that not true? Because I feel the same way. Is like, I will never again sacrifice my joy and my peace for just over accomplishment and more and more. And so like, I just want to grow both of those. I want to maintain, here's my time blocks for my family, for my partner, for my friends, for my gym, for my health, for myself. And then here's my time blocks for my business, and see what we can create given that.
That sounds similar to me. I think we're aligned in that. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's a good question. That's a good question. I think for me, there's like you. I think you're going to see similarities in overachievers, right? Usually, there's like a point we're trying to prove that came from some issue we had when we were young.
Mhm.
And for me, like when I was skating, I always felt like everyone was better than me. And so I felt like the way that I would succeed beyond them was just by putting in more time. So if they were skating 3 hours a day, I was gonna skate 6. And I even remember like my wife looking at me when we first got married, and she was like, "You are too much with this. Like the second you wake up, you leave the house at 8, you don't get back till 6. You're skating nonstop. You won't miss a day." And I always tell her, I have to do this to compete because I'm not capable of competing with them if I'm not, over delivering. And I think that carried over with me being fearful for starting the new company. But here's what I found, and you kind of nailed it. And I was very encouraged by this. When I started trying to build the business with my family in mind, it forced me to delegate more than I had prior. And it finally put me in a situation where I was building a business the correct way, which is that it's being put in a position where it can run without me. And that is like when you first brought up most entrepreneurs struggle with control and fear. You're correct. And they're always the entrepreneurs that don't build anything of size because they'll never let people be put in a position of authority or control or decision-making, which is limiting. And when I finally got comfortable with that, I mean, this company is not even close in comparison to the brewery as far as size, scale, complexity. This is a completely different monster. And I could never have done that if I would have attempted to build it the way we built the other stuff.
Yep. And that's where the brick comes down to, right? Is because, you were doing, I don't know, how much revenue were you doing at the brewery?
And not a ton, like just under 10.
Okay. And then now you're doing...
It's different.
It's different, right?
Yeah.
And you probably spend more time. You're probably working less than you were with the brewery.
I am working less with my company today than anything in the past. Skateboarding, everything.
Yep.
Yeah, I have non-negotiables now. Like I when I was skating or the brewery, I wouldn't take one day off. Now, Saturdays and Sundays, I do not work. There's no phone. There's no work. That's family time.
That's
Monday
so
through
awesome.
Friday is all you get from me.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
love that. And that's so, because I was on Twitter and Mr. Beast was like, I make $1 million a day. And Elon Musk goes, I make $1 million a minute, and
He's
so
such a savage, man.
So they're just like, there's different levels to the game.
Yeah.
And we all have the same 24 hours in a day.
Correct.
So it comes down to how good of a leader are you? How good are you at encouraging people to want to do what has to be done?
Mm-hmm.
And at that, if you can do that, your capacity to build is infinite.
That's right.
Really, right? Because I mean, you have a really massive, incredible company, but to some people like Elon Musk, you have a really tiny, easy operation.
Totally.
Right? And same with me. It's like
pebble in the pond.
Yeah, like to my family, I'm like the richest person in the world, and to the people in my network, I'm like pond scum.
Yeah.
And so there's always there's levels to the game,
Right.
and it all comes down to people. Because if you and I are just sheer competing on our 24 hours and what we can do with it to go operate a task, we're never going to get anywhere. It's seeing the vision, being the creator, being the visionary, and inspiring people who are better than you to actually operate in their unique gift and their ability, which is so hard. Like that's the hardest thing, is the people management, the leadership, and trusting and being able to track,
Right.
like have metrics
That's right.
on where things are at and know when things are clogged or broken or need to be improved or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah,
You nailed it.
because I want to have a $315 million fund too. I want to have a $500 million fund. I want to have $1 billion fund.
That's
right.
I'm with you.
But then it's like the whole thing sounds so overwhelming because for those who don't know, do you guys focus more on development or value add?
Pretty much all development.
Pretty much all development.
Adaptive reuse and development.
Okay. And are you pretty equal multifamily storage?
Our storage fund was larger than multifamily until this last year. We have feels like 6 multifamily deals for every 1 storage deal. There's just more demand right now for multifamily.
And how many projects do you have going at a time?
right now.
Yeah.
We have, let's see, we have 4 under construction, and then we have 3 pre-construction, and then we have about, starting April, we have a closing every month for about 15 months. We have a lot coming up.
Yeah, that's a ton of project management. And how many employees or crews are?
We have about 20. We have about 20 people inside of my firm, and then when you do a deal, that kind of splinters off into a lot of people being involved.
Yeah,
you have your GC and your superintendent, and all the way down to, once it's complete, your property manager. So we typically have asset managers overlooking a handful of projects. And then, in a perfect world, we'll do a handful of development deals in the same area so that we can just move a crew from one over to the other once they finish their stage.
Yeah.
But it's a lot. We have about 140 million under construction right now.
That's crazy.
I think we have another 200 slated for the next 15 months.
Wow.
We have a lot going on right now.
Yeah. And so you have these massive projects, tons of people to manage, and in construction, and I used to own small construction companies. And
yeah, it is. There's a lot of people.
It's horrible.
Totally.
Well, and then you have materials.
Yep.
And everything dominoes. And one domino goes down, the whole thing goes down. I was not happy, Hannah, during that time.
Yeah,
it was very difficult. And then you have the fund. And then are you raising from retail investors, or you have institutional money?
No, basically everything's retail. We have about almost 800 investors.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, retail investor just means like you. You're
Yes.
a retail investor. I'm a retail investor. Institutional would be, BlackRock or one of those bigger funds.
Correct.
So that's a lot of people to manage. And when you give someone your money, you want to know, where's my money? How's my money doing? When am I getting my money back? Or if there's any problem, it's this whole, nightmare. And then it's a lot. So the fund is its own company in itself. And you have investor relations, and you have fund administration, and you have all these things. And then you have your development and your property management and your acquisitions and trying to source these deals, and then your dispose and trying to sell these deals or rebuy these deals or fill these deals. So it's like so much. And the only way you can do that is by learning how to be a good leader and learning how to find those right people.
Yeah, that's right. It's a business. Yeah,
So,
100%.
Yeah. So what have you learn? Like, how did you get into the fund space? I know you knew real estate, you believed in real estate, you'd been investing in fund. And so you go from exited the company, prioritize my family, get your emotions and identity in check.
Figure out who I was. Yeah.
And then how'd you go from, and what year did you start?
The company?
Yeah.
So I think I started working on Commune the end of 17.
Okay.
And so this is basically how it happened. I was a really well-known skater, right? And skateboarders, when they finish, they typically move back into the industry and they start working for a company, or they become a team manager or something. I didn't do that. And in this time of figuring out what to do, I had other skaters calling me going, "Where'd you go? Like, I don't see you. What are you doing? Are you okay?" And every single one of them asked me the same question: how are you making money? And because that's the biggest fear for us as skaters. Like, how do you make money after skateboarding? And so I basically would tell all of them, well, I've been planning for this for 15 years. And, I'm at the point where I don't have to work, and so on and so forth. And one of my friends named Sean Malto, who's a very known pro skateboarder, says, "Dude, how do I do that? Like, I need that also." And when he said that, something clicked, and I went, oh my gosh, I had somebody come into my life when I was 19 years old, helped me build the path to the position I'm in today. How do I do that for other skaters? And so I created this concept for Commune Capital, and I built out the whole business plan, right? And at this time, it was probably a 10-page deck, and it was built around the idea of what I felt in skateboarding, which was always a us against the world type of community. It felt like it was family. No one could mess with us. It was awesome in that regard. So I wanted to create this company that had the community feel, hence the name Commune. And I wanted the mission to be kind of 2 parts. One, we were all going to put our money together to kind of strengthen numbers and buy assets that we can't buy alone. And 2, I wanted it to be an education vehicle to do what my mentor did for me, right? Like I didn't just give him money and he placed it and here I am at, 30 years old with an exit, behind my back. It was, okay, this is what you're going to do and go do it. That was his model. And so I started the company. I built it originally for skaters. That then moved into just athletes in general. And then before I knew it, there were, people in sales that had the same concern we had. Hey man, my salary, starts over every year, and I got to get back to the grind. If I let off, it's, my lifestyle's done and I haven't been investing, I've been spending, and I don't know what to do either. And then the company just kind of became something greater than I even intended it to be in the beginning. But all that to say, when I was building out this business plan, I had, our mission, our identity, what we were setting out to do, why we were different. And then I had a part that said fund with a question mark. It was the only part of this thing that I didn't know, right? And if you go back to my last business, I knew how to build a business plan. I knew how to raise money. I knew how to build the organization, but that was not a fund. We raised money for just the expenses and operating capital for the brewery. And so I brought it to my mentor. And I was like, hey, dude, I need you to run through this business plan. And I don't know this page. I need you to either teach me this page or show me who I need to hire to build it out. And so what I didn't mention to you is he connected me with his brother who operated the storage portfolio that I made my first storage investment in. And so I sat down with them and they presented the idea with me about actually starting this company together. And so we started Commune together. And at this time, my partner owned the storage portfolio that I was passively investing in. And so we launched the brand. It's only focused on multifamily at this time. We, have our marketing campaign. We're using social. We're building our brand identity. And it is growing at such a faster rate than my partner's storage portfolio. But the thing about a storage portfolio, this has been a grand slam of a portfolio, right? 21x return for the original investor. It's been a monster. And we're outpacing him on growth.
Wow.
And he's going, what is happening? And so basically what we realized was he built his traditionally, the old school way. When you perform for an investor, that investor tells a friend, then you get a new investor. And over time, it becomes something of significance. We're building a brand. And now all of a sudden we have investors coming in online. We have brokers giving us off-market deals as if we've had 10-year relationships with them, didn't know who they were. We had everybody wanted to work with us. And so in 2020, they actually presented the idea about us merging our companies together. And then I think at the end of 20 or 21, we ended up merging the companies together. And then I inherited his storage portfolio, one of his debt portfolios. And then since then, we've launched 7 other offerings.
Okay. And are these 5-year funds?
No, we typically go long. So
7?
No,
10?
longer. I don't sell assets. Okay, so there are so many different ways to do this. For me, what I found is every asset that I've sold, I look back and go, gosh, I shouldn't have sold that. I should have just refied again, right? And so what we do is something called a tender offering. So we target to do this every 5 to 7 years. And basically my firm will offer to buy shares from investors who want liquidity so that we can offer liquidity without having to sell assets that we want. And so that's what we've been doing. It doesn't mean we don't sell assets. We did sell 4 assets in the last 4 years, but what it takes for me to sell an asset means I'm getting an offer that makes no sense.
Yeah.
And you don't get those every day.
Yeah. Yeah, that was always my challenge with the real estate equity funds is you don't want to sell these assets.
No.
That's the whole point is you buy low or you develop, then you add the value and then you cash flow and you have all the depreciation, you don't have recapture and the whole thing.
Bingo.
So, okay.
So that's been a good model for us.
Yeah.
That's been working.
So it all comes back to building a brand.
Always.
And what
always.
Huh?
Always. Yeah.
I love that. And I think that's in a world where we're so disconnected. I mean, we're connected through technology and stuff, but we're disconnected as people, right? I think in a world where AI and technology is everything, that emotional touch and somebody doing business with a person, an actual real thing,
Mm.
I think is just so important for moving forward. And I don't know, building a brand and a personal brand and a brand of the company. Like think of Coca-Cola
Mhm.
or I mean, any of the big brands, right? I actually am reading the book right now called The Birth of a Brand. And I saw him speak, the founder of UGG, and sharing that story on how he built a brand. And yeah, so I guess what is because you're so good at building a brand, what is the most important thing to do that? How do you build a successful brand that people are so loyal to, and it's like a cult-like following, and that everybody knows it when they see it? And
that's a good question. So if you're going to build a brand, you have to give people a reason to connect with something beyond the product or the service, right? That's really what it comes down to. We spend so much time trying to create the best product, and we think the product sells. But if you ask me why I wore Nikes, it was because of MJ. That was the only reason. When I put on MJ's shoe, I felt like I ran faster and I jumped higher. That was only because of him as his brand, right? If you ask me about Tesla, I'm on my third Tesla. That's because of Elon. Yes, his product is great, but I actually bought the car for the first time because of him. I wanted to support what he was doing because I thought I bought into his mission, right? And so how you do that, you've got to be a real person and take people through the journey that you're currently going through, right? And that's the tough part. And I think this has been something that we've known for a long time. Just social media has kind of muddied the water a little bit because it's difficult to bring people through the reality of your life. It's easy to just show them the wins, right? We talked about this in the beginning, but the reality is people don't connect with wins. People connect with struggle, right? So this is a perfect story to articulate this. I get invited in 2021 to go to FinCon. It's like this big financial conference, and it's in Texas this year. And there was this like TikTok influencer house that I got invited to, right? And it was like 10 or 12 of the largest financial influencers on TikTok were going to be staying at this house. And they're like, Mikey, do you want to go? And at first I'm like, I'm 38 years old. I don't even think I'm an influencer. I'm just using the app to, build brands. But I was like curious to see like what it was about.
I don't think I'm an influencer.
Right?
I'm just using the app to build
I'm just
brands.
using the app, yeah. So I go to this house and the oldest person is 22 years old,
Oh,
right? So the range was 17 to 22. And I'm out here almost 40 years old, right? And here was the irony. I was like, you guys are the largest financial influencers on TikTok, and the oldest one is 22. You guys haven't even been through anything yet. How are you the largest financial influencers, right? And this is why, because they tapped into something that we have forgotten, which was they weren't telling people how to do it. They were taking people along the journey with them, right? So you had this girl who was in college. She was learning about finance, and she would build content going, this is what I learned today, and I'm going to try it, and let's download this app, and I'm going to make an investment. So she was walking her, center of influence or her peers through the journey for the first time. And that's what people were resonating with. I made a decision. I messed up. I lost money, right? I bought NVIDIA, DeepSeek, dropped the price. I got scared. I sold, and dang it, I shouldn't have sold because it rebounded the next week. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm just saying. Her audience is going, oh my gosh, okay, I watched you do it. I saw the mistake you made. Now I'm going to try to do something different. That's what people connect with. Yeah. But it's scary to show yourself going through something you don't know yet, right? This is a big thing with real estate agents. You sell real estate, right? Mm-hmm. So real estate agents, if you look at the people that do the best, they're not showing like highly, how would you say it? They're not showing, perfect picture photos of the houses they're, selling, or they're not doing walkthroughs in these huge luxury homes. That's not the people that resonate, right? It's like the girl in her car that's crying because she's done 20 open houses and hasn't sold a project and property and doesn't know what. They're like, the audience is like, oh my gosh, keep going, girl. You got this. And then you get a win and they're rooting for you now. And that's what builds the audience.
Yeah. It's funny because one of my most viewed videos was just a casual video of me being like, I lost $450,000 of escrows this week. And like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and that's what people resonate with. And I think it's so And we started the conversation with that. So many people just share their wins, but that's just like icing on the cake.
Yep.
It's the tip of the iceberg, and
Yep.
there's all the mud underneath, but that's where the growth happens, and that's where we become capable of whatever we're going to do.
How you know if you're doing it right, when you finally do promote the win, your audience is like, so well deserved. I've been watching you for 2 years. So proud of you for sticking with it. Like, they feel vested as well, right? If you show in, your audience feels like they won with you. That means you're doing it right, because you're taking them along the journey. You're not just showing how good you are,
Right. And so that part of your strategy's been very authentic about the challenges of the journey that you've gone through.
Yeah. To tell you the truth, I actually learned this one from my wife. So when I was skateboarding and, adding on to this, the thing I was talking to you about where I felt like I wasn't as good as everybody, when I would mess up, right? When I would struggle, this part of my personality that was very comical would come out. Like, I'm very entertaining to watch when I'm struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And so my wife was the one that challenged me. She was like, look, all people see is you landing tricks. Why don't you show them what it actually looks like for you to suck? Because it's so funny, right? And so I created this kind of webisode. It was in like 2007. So this is before social media. And I picked up a camera and I would basically film myself and my friend skating. And I would basically show the outtakes of me struggling. And when that launched, it was called Mikey Days, it went nuts. Like, my brand grew so significantly because the kids actually got to see their, maybe potentially favorite pro struggling just like them. And so I've tried to take that path into what I do now, but it's not as easy today as it was when I was skating. I think because I'm managing so many investors' dollars that, like, you got to be careful that you're not giving mixed messages like this thing's blowing up. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to maintain confidence and also show struggles, but that's actually been harder for me these days. Mm-hmm. Like, how do I show something I'm struggling with and still uphold confidence from all of our investors to want to keep working with us?
Right. Because now it's not just your mistake. It's affecting, hundreds of people. Correct. And hundreds of millions of dollars.
That's right.
Yeah. So what's been the most challenging thing? I know we're going to wrap up here in a couple minutes, but the most challenging thing with building a large fund, because I'm doing it. I'm embarking on this journey. So selfishly, I want to know, what should I be looking out for, or anybody else be looking out for who are starting a fund, building a fund? My fund's evergreen. It just means it's not going to shut down.
Yeah, an open-ended
fund.
But
what advice would you give to somebody like me who's going down this hole?
Okay. I have evergreen funds or open-ended funds, not all of them. Those were so hard for me.
Really?
Yes. They're the best to have because they're the cleanest to operate, but they were always the hardest for me to raise money with. So we could talk about that at dinner.
Yeah.
I would say, one, the hardest part about growing funds or, on the private equity side of real estate is they're not revenue generating businesses. They're wealth build businesses. So you feel like your net worth is cranking and you're just cash poor. Mm-hmm. And so the growth of your company feels slow because you're raising money for projects. That project does give you an acquisition fee and it does give you a management fee, but it's not a lot. So that basically just keeps your lights on. And then as you hire, it just feels slow. And so what I would say is have a strategy that gives you liquidity events without having to deplete all your assets. So a strategy that we've been on that's been really helpful is build 3, sell 1, right? I'm telling you that we never sell them, but when you sell it, you participate in your profit split or your carried interest. That's the money, right? Yeah. And so if you're trying to grow, you just want to be mindful that those big capital infusions, that's going to be very significant for you to hire out your team to get to the next level.
Yeah.
Gosh, regulation is brutal here. Like, be very careful with
in
what
California
you can and can't
or
do.
Just in
no,
funds?
our industry is
SEC.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what you can and can't say is, when we talk about building with the end in mind, build this thing as if you are not only regulated by the SEC, but potentially regulated by FINRA. Like, don't do anything today that's going to get you in trouble 10 years from now because you're small. Do the things that are going to be successful for you down the road. Okay. And then the second you can bring people on, bring them on. For me, I'm not an operator. I'm a visionary. So my first hire is always the operator. It's the COO. So that's always kind of what I look for, the CFO or the COO. Then it's the CFO. Then it's, splintered out business development, your compliance or legal and all of that, so that I can just focus on where we're headed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm visionary too.
Yeah. The book Traction. For anybody who's a visionary, read the book Traction.
Do you run your fund on EOS?
We do.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, cool. My partner runs it. He's $500 million in fund, and he runs on EOS.
Yeah, it's a great system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said it was life-changing.
It's life-changing for a business owner.
Yeah.
Especially a visionary.
Yeah.
The visionary is life-changing for.
Yeah. I'm rereading Traction right now. It's so good, and just started working with an implementer.
Good.
So
Yeah.
EOS, entrepreneur operating system.
Yeah.
Best way to run a business under, what do they say? Under like
I can't remember what it's under.
Up to mid-size. I forget what the government considers mid-size business, but it's up to a pretty big business.
Yeah. Yeah.
But awesome. All right, cool. So we're going to wrap up here. What's next for you?
Good question. Okay, real quick, business. We're launching a affordable housing fund and tapping into a government incentive that was created in California to build more of these. So that's going to be the 15 projects starting April. We have, our financial goals. We, want to double AUM in the next 3 years. I want to get to $1.5 billion and, potentially $6 billion in the next 10. I've got 4 beautiful kids, 3 girls and a boy. And so that's a big goal. I want my girls to be, phenomenal women and, eventually moms. And I want my son to be a great, father and man. And so, teaching them how to do it, that's probably the hardest thing I do.
Yeah.
And then, making sure I have a great relationship with my wife and that we're thriving together. And then, if I become mayor next year, I'll have to navigate all of that, for 26.
And then.
That's right.
The list is always going.
That's right.
But it's fun.
Super fun.
Awesome.
100%.
And then I'll finish with, if you could give any piece of advice to your 18-year-old self, what would it be?
Okay. Forgive me because this is going to be very specific to my personality type, but my personality type is, and even to go more specific, my love language is words of affirmation, right? You tell me I'm doing a good job. That's all I need to hear. I feel good, right? And so the risk, if you have that type of personality, is you start trying to be what you think the person in front of you wants to see. And that almost killed my joy because I was kind of everything to everyone. And I had to really get comfortable with who I was and the fact that if I was being myself, there were going to be people that didn't like me, and I had to be okay with that. Once I learned that, I became so much happier. But I didn't learn that till I was probably 26, 27. If I could have picked that up at 18, I would have been much more happier. I would have had a larger skate career, and I would have had a larger business faster.
Love it. Be your authentic self.
Just be yourself and let the chips fall where they fall.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.